Hey, Tommy, how are you?
Hey Steve, how are you, man? I'm good.
Good. I wanted to first of all talk to you about New York because I know you're from New York. Are you from Brooklyn originally?
I was born in Brooklyn, um, and I lived there until I was about 12. And then I moved out, my family moved out to Staten Island. And that's pretty much where I did most of my rock and roll high school, if you want to call it, you
Staten
know,
Island. Wow.
yeah. My teen years were all out in Staten Island, all my
When did you
teens.
wh- did you start playing the drums when you were in Staten Island?
Nah, I was playing drums way before that. I started it when I was about 8 years old in
Wow.
Brooklyn. Yeah, yeah. I was actually in a band in Brooklyn called the Tablets. And we did all surf music, all instrumental surf music, and we were all about, I don't know, 10 years old, between 8 and 10. The local music store there, it took kids out of each class, drum class, guitar class, and class, and put bands together, like what they do at School of Rock, but this was in the 60s.
Wow.
And so, yeah, they put this little band together of four little guys, and we learned a bunch of surf music, and yeah, they even got us gigs. We were doing, Sweet 16 parties and pool parties out in Staten Island, and yeah, it was fun, man. It was something I wanted to do from as far back as I can remember, and once I got a chance to actually start doing it, I never looked back. I wanted to keep going.
Do you remember what kind of what music you were listening to back then? I mean, were you influenced by what you were hearing?
Absolutely. Well, I mean, there was nobody to sing in that little band, but the music we were listening to were like the Animals,
Nice.
the Rolling Stones, of course, Dave Clark Five, the Young Rascals, all of that great, like blue-eyed soul, they called it, that early rock and roll, uh, some American, some British invasion stuff. And yeah, it was all bands like that.
So you really got into the rock and roll at an early age.
I did. My older brother was a big, Bob Dylan, Animals, and Rascals fan. So I used to steal his LPs and bring them into my room and play them. But yeah, there was constant. I grew up around music. My cousins, all my cousins were musicians. My first cousins. So whenever there was a family event, they were always the band that played. So we'd have so much fun. My family was, I come from a really big um, East Coast Italian Irish family, lots of
Nice.
kids running around, lots of parties every weekend, and somebody's getting engaged, someone's getting married, someone's getting divorced, whatever. There was always a party for whatever event was going on in my family. And there were always my cousins playing in their band.
That's cool. I know you play other instruments too, but was it always the drums up until recent
No,
years?
I actually started playing guitar first.
Really?
Before I picked up the drums, I I had a guitar one of my cousins gave me, and I taught myself how to play guitar.
Wow.
Yeah, I always loved playing guitar. I write songs on guitar. That's how I write. I play on all my solo records. I play guitar, but
That's
I figured out somewhere along the way I was better. I was a better drummer than guitar player.
that's
So
funny that
that's how I made a living. That's the
yeah.
instrument I chose to make a living was drums.
Yeah, it's funny because I recently read an article by a writer named Jim Rutland, and he said if you want to know what's really going on in the band, talk to the drummer. The drummer usually knows everything. Is that true? Is that statement true that the
Oh,
drummer knows
I
everything?
don't know about that. I don't know about that. I wouldn't know what goes on in, bands, but I I I I don't know. I've never heard that before, but maybe he's right. Maybe he's right.
I've had a lot of drummers on my show, and I always like. Matter of fact, a friend of mine, Greg Allen, was a drummer, also is the one that first told me that I should talk to you. And
Yeah.
he I guess he used to play with Johnny Rayo, so he knew about Downtown Phantom, and he said I should talk to you. He was the one that got the ball rolling on this. Um, when did you first get in a band that was like a recording band? When did that start happening for you?
Started recording with some local kids where I grew up in Staten Island at the age of, like, I don't know, maybe 14, 13 or 14. I had a buddy that lived around the corner from me that was actually started writing songs at a very young age. We had a local band that we put together called Mania on Staten Island. But he was actually a songwriter at a very young age, like I said, and he managed to put a recording studio. In them days, a 4-track TAC reel to reel was a big deal to have in your bedroom. But this guy went even further and started buying all this outboard gear, like delay units and reverb units. He had a patch bay built, and so we do all our early demos in his house, in his garage,
Wow.
before it was considered garage rock. We were doing it in 1972 and 1973 in his garage, making records in his garage. That's how I met Kenny Laguna, through
Really?
this guy. This guy that I was playing with, Joe Maury, his name is, and he got signed to Liba Krebs management, that managed Aerosmith and Ted Nugent, all them bands. And so Kenny Laguna was sharing office space. He had just gotten Joan Jett on his roster, and he was working with her. And they sent him out. They since they were sharing an office, this kid needed demos made, and they sunk a little bit of money into it and asked Kenny to do them a favor and go out to Staten Island and produce some, like, 3 good songs. And that's how I met Kenny at 14 years old. Kenny
Interesting.
Laguna walks in and he's a producer, and that's my that was the beginning of starting to record records, was at 14.
Well,
Yeah.
you met Kenny Laguna before you met Joan. That's
Oh
interesting.
yeah, for sure. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I was
Well,
supposed to be the original drummer in that band, but a couple of years later, when he was putting the Blackhearts together, but I couldn't do it because I had just secured the job with Mink Deville and booked an entire European tour. So I passed on the Joan Jett thing, and then a couple of years later, they had I Love Rock and Roll. You know,
as far as the timeline goes, Mink Deville was before Billy Idol.
way before. Oh yeah, yeah. Mink Deville was like 1979. I started playing with him, up until maybe 82. But before I played with Billy, I was in Scandal, the other band Scandal, with
Patty
Patti
Smythe.
Smythe.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did an incredibly long ass tour on one song, on Goodbye to You.
Yeah. Big hit.
And, yeah, I think we were on the road for about 12 months. Once we came off the road, we needed to go in the studio and record a new record, and that was the Warrior album that Mike Chapman produced, and that's how I met Billy, in the same studio.
Wow.
Yeah, I had just finished making a record I was still making a record with Scandal, and Billy was upstairs at Electric Lady. We were both recording both records at Electric Lady. He was doing Rebel Yell upstairs, and the Warrior album was being made downstairs in Studio A. And Stephen Billy and Keith Forsey were having trouble finding a drummer to play on the record, on the Rebel Yell record. And they heard me playing downstairs while I was recording with Scandal. Asked me to come up and possibly do some work with them, and I did. And
Wow.
I was going for the next 2 months. I was going upstairs and downstairs, making both records.
So you were simultaneously doing Scandal and Billy Idol. That's pretty
Yeah,
cool.
and then about I don't know, when those records were released, they seemed to be released at the same time, around '84, spring of '84, I think, and both of them were on the charts. Like the Warrior record and Rebel Yell were being played, back to back on the radio. So nobody was better than me in them days, man.
Did you do much touring with Billy Idol as well?
Very much. Yeah, I toured with him all through the '80s.
Wow.
Yeah, whenever I wasn't working with Joan, I'd be working with Billy. So I did the Rebel Yell album and tour, and then I did Whiplash Smile album and tour. Up until '89, I was still working with Billy. Yeah.
So how did Joan come into the picture if you were already working with Billy Idol?
Um, once Billy and Steve had moved from New York to Los Angeles, and I thought about moving out there, but I was, after Rebel Yell came out, I was getting a lot of work from that one record in New York, and all them records that I was on were being made in New York City. So I really didn't want to do the move. Plus, all my family was in New York. I didn't want to go to California. So we kind of lost touch for a little while. But with Joan, Kenny, every once in a while, her partner, Kenny Laguna, would call me from time to time and see if I was busy or not busy, and I'd come in and work with her. I think around in 1985, they asked me to come out to LA and do the soundtrack for a movie Joan was doing called Light of Day
Oh yeah. Yeah,
with
I
Michael
remember
J.
that.
Fox.
Yeah.
So I went out to LA, did that record. And then after that, I think she toured with another drummer for a little bit until he left, Lee Crystal. And so at that time, I was still doing a lot of records in New York. Joan was coming off the road and asked me to come in the studio. I think it was the next record was Good Music, was Joan's next LP. And then I brought Chasm Sultan. They needed a bass player also. And I brought Chasm Sultan in to do that record with us. And Chasm and I, from that period, started touring with Joan. So from Good Music on, after we did Light of Day, and then Good Music followed that. And that's when I sort of made the decision to just stick with her for as long as I can. And yeah, and I made half my career, half my life was spent with her. So 35, 37 years, something like that.
I saw many Joan Jett and the Blackhearts shows, man, that
Yeah.
you played, and you guys were always. The band was always on, man. The band was always on. I saw.
Yeah, she always had a good band. She always surrounded herself with good players, which I appreciated that.
I loved when Joan said at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame that you should have been up there too. And I don't understand. Did anyone ever give you an explanation for that? Why they didn't present you?
Well, they pretty much went on that one song, which is this one song I didn't play on. I Love Rock and Roll. I didn't play on that song. So they pretty much got the band inducted because of that song, because them guys happened to be playing on that song. But it wasn't a big deal for me. I was there and I shared their happiness, and it was a great night. We had a great time with Tommy James, and you know, the jam at the end was fantastic, and it was just a bunch of fun.
I
So
love how
I
Jones, mentioned you and said that on stage. I thought
yeah,
that was
yeah,
fantastic.
yeah,
And she said you should have been there. And a lot of people felt the same way. But the
yeah,
Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is
whatever. Yeah,
it's not exactly the most popular organization around.
nah, not at all. That's okay. That's all right.
So are you through with the Blackhearts now, or are you going to play with them anymore? Have you moved on?
No, I moved out of New York about a year and a half ago, so I'm living down in Texas now, my wife and I. Um, so the last record I did with Joan she had me play on the Wanda Jackson record that she co-produced. And yeah, I had to stop touring. The reason why I stopped touring with them 5 years ago was because I had gotten cancer.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm 6 years cancer free now, but at the time, it took me off the road. My doctors wouldn't, it was impossible because I needed surgery. I needed to go through, half a year of treatment, all that stuff that you do when you get cancer. And so it took me out of the picture. And then once I moved here, I started discovering new music, and I opened my ears to stuff that I neglected to do years ago, and that's the great stuff coming out of Nashville and Austin. The new records being made there is just really beautiful. It's a combination of country and pop and rock and roll, and it's just a big, great sounding, stuff that I want to get into. I want to be more of a part of that. Maybe produce some records. But I'm doing stuff for my home now. I put in a studio here in my house, and I'm doing remote drum tracks from my house. That's what my website is all about. That we talked about before. I had the great people at Electro Voice microphones set me up with the whole mic'd up kit, and got some new gear here, and yeah, and I'm digging it. So we already done a couple of projects here already, and we've gotten some good results.
So is it been easy to adapt being a New Yorker and living in Texas?
Actually, it's been real easy for me. I don't know why. I mean, you would think a guy like me, if someone would have told me 6 years ago, well, 2 years ago, that I'd be living in Texas, I would have said, "You're fucking nuts." You know, I was a real bug, man. I was a New York cockroach. There was no way I was going to leave that place. You know, I used to say when I toured and left all the time that I like leaving, but I love coming home. Once I saw that skyline, every time that plane we'd come into LaGuardia, man, I knew I was home. It was just a warm blanket over me. It was beautiful. But yeah, I found it pretty easy, man. I think living in New York apartments all my life, you know, um, once I got here, I had a little bit more space and I felt like a king.
I saw a video that you posted on your YouTube page, and you were like all excited about your neighborhood and everything. It seemed like you liked having a little more space, you know?
Well, yeah, man. I grew up in, geez, and even in Brooklyn, a 2-bedroom apartment, and then all my life living in Gramercy Park or the East Village. It was always 1 and 2-bedroom apartments. So
Yeah.
you had to make the best out of it. I never lived in a house before. And
I,
now all of a sudden I have all this space, and I managed to fill it up pretty good though while I've been here, man. I bought a motorcycle, and I managed to get all my drum kits that were scattered all over New York in different storage spaces, all brought here, and they're all in the same spot now. And
wow.
I'm
That
happy
must
about
feel
that.
good. I lived on 10th Street in between First and Second in the late 80s, so I know what you're talking about. It's all
Yeah,
different.
yeah.
Then I lived,
And
I've
yes,
lived in 7 states, but New York is like, it's the greatest place in the world, but having a little space is not a bad thing at all.
it's great. I got comfortable real quick here, believe me,
Are
man.
you near a city or are you close to
I'm
any?
in San Antonio. Oh, well, I'm out. I live in the suburbs of San Antonio, but it's a real city. It's a normal,
I like San
very
Antonio.
artsy, very hip artsy. It's kind of reminds me of Toronto, Canada. Very young, hip people. There's a big art community here. There's a lot of great artists, painters, and sculptors and artists. There's a lot of museums downtown, and places to go look at beautiful art stuff. My wife used to own a gallery here years ago, so she ran an art gallery in San Antonio years ago.
So was it her idea to move down there?
Well, she still has family here, so it was an easy move for us. I mean, it wasn't like we were going into something blind.
Right.
She knew she grew up here, and she knew the people, she knew the food, she knew how to get around was a big deal, so it was pretty easy for us to do that. It wasn't a big deal.
I really like San Antonio. I stayed there several times on the Riverwalk. And
It's
the
gorgeous.
food, you mentioned the food. That's some of the best Tex-Mex
I'm
around right
telling you,
there.
man, the Tex-Mex stuff here, you can't beat the
Yeah.
barbecue, and you can't go wrong with the food here. People know how to cook. Yeah.
So I know that you've been working on different things, and more recently, I guess it was in 2020, Downtown Phantom was a project that you did with Johnny Rayo and Joe Vasta. If I'm not mistaken, didn't you play with? I thought I heard that you and Joe played with Tom Verlaine at one
Oh
time.
yeah, yeah. We did a record with Tom Verlaine uh during the Mink Deville days. Joey also played in Mink Deville with me.
Oh,
Um,
okay, so you guys
yeah.
met there, and then you hooked up with Verlaine.
Yeah, through a guitar player that Tom Verlaine worked with, Jimmy Rip. He was a New
Okay,
York guitar player, session dude. I think he played with who? I think Keith Richards. He was in one of Keith's solo bands or something. But anyway, he brought us into the Tom Verlaine. I think the record was called Words from the Front.
yeah, one of his solo records. Yeah,
Yeah, Words from the Front. It was called. It was right after television broke up, and it was just an early solo record of his.
and Johnny came. I know Johnny played with David Johansen. And
Yep.
did you know Johnny for a long time?
Yeah, I grew up with him, man. He was one of the guys that when I was 13 years old that I played with on Staten Island. Johnny grew up with me on Staten Island with Chasm and Earl Slick and Johan. We all were, Staten Islanders.
I didn't know
Yeah.
Earl Slick was from Staten Island. I met Earl a
Oh
couple
yeah,
of times. Good guy.
yeah, yeah.
So I'm on my show before and after the interview. I got a couple tracks here. I'm going to play Some Strange, which I think is phenomenal, and Tangerine. Those are the two that I listened to that I thought were, I like the all stuff, but those two I really like. Tell us about that project and what that was like. And was that a one-off thing, or you plan on doing more with those guys?
Well, yeah, it was a one-off project that Johnny and I started writing years ago. We were doing it. Um, we did the writing all remotely. Like he would send me a track, and I was just getting into GarageBand at the time, just learning how to use it. So he'd send me just a instrumental track or whatever, and then I put a melody to it or put some vocals on it, change things around. So it started out doing that. Some Strange was one of the first songs we wrote together, and that went through changes, that song. But we did the whole record was written like that. And then once it was all done, then we took it into a real recording studio and put real drums on it. You know, everything was just before it was all, drum machines and programs. And I always knew at the end of the day I was going to put real drums on everything. And that's what we wound up doing. We had Michael Young, producer that did the early Cars record. He worked with the Cars, and he helped us out with that one. So he produced that song, and he changed. Yeah, he changed it up, and it was a one-off project, Downtown Phantom, but it still hasn't really been listened to, I don't think. So we want to try. There's songs on there that I think I can hear in movies. There's songs like "Sitting on Gold" or "Breaking Out of Missouri." Those songs are definite movie songs if you listen to them.
Yeah, the
But
record
also,
definitely
Greg
does.
Allen co-wrote a song with us on that.
Yeah, I
Also,
heard. That's
yeah,
awesome.
"Living with Your Ghost" is one of the greater songs on that record. Was co-written by me, Johnny, and Greg Allen.
Yeah, I've known Greg for a long time, man. He's a really good guy. He's been playing in a lot of good bands over the years. He's up here in I'm up in the Boston area. So
Right. Okay.
did you guys ever play the band probably didn't have a chance to play live because of the pandemic and everything, right?
No, we never got a chance to. We never got it off the ground. We'd go in and rehearse, me playing drums. And then we couldn't figure out I couldn't figure out if I wanted to play drums or guitar because I played a lot of guitar on the record. And I was thinking about hiring a drummer because I did that years ago with Chasm when we had the Price Sultan band. I fronted the band playing guitar and hired another drummer. But so then we'd go in with Downtown Phantom, the three of us would go into SIR, rehearse, and I'd be running back and forth, either playing guitar, playing drums. So, and then once the pandemic hit, we were like, ah, shit, now we, you know,
Yeah, that screwed
so
everything up.
it kind of spoiled it.
Do you listen to a lot of you mentioned that you were kind of heard a lot of new music down there. Do you listen generally to a lot of new music or do you find yourself going back to the old stuff?
No, I've been actually listening to some new stuff. I've been listening to a lot of the newer bands coming off of Little Stevens stations.
Underground
The
garage.
Underground
So you like
Garage.
garage rock.
What's that?
You like garage rock then?
Well, it's a mixture of garage rock and well, on that station they play everything. It's a rock and soul station, Little Stevens. But there's a lot of new bands on that station that are really interesting. I love it's not new, but I love what Jack White is doing, his
Oh
new
yeah.
record. I like what the Helicopters are doing, but there's all these newer bands that get played a lot. I can't think of anything off the top of my head. I like what's his name? His new record, Rick. Oh, shit, I'm gonna forget his name. Joey Ramone's brother, Lee, something.
Okay.
He's got a new record out. Mickey Lee, that's his name, Mickey
Mickey
Lee.
Lee. Mickey Lee.
Yeah, he's got a new record out that I like. So then I hear that every day on Underground Garage, but there's other stuff down here in Austin, coming out of Austin. I've been working with Patricia Vaughn lately. She's kind of like a pop. She's an actress, but she does this. She does a great. She's a good pop singer. Writes some great music. I just played on a Christmas album with her this past Christmas.
So
She's interesting. I like her. I like the sound of what they're doing up in Austin.
you mentioned your website before. Tell us a little about that and how that all works.
Well, it's a website strictly just for drum tracks. So you go through when you click it on, you'll see all the mics that I use, you know, what your options are as far as going through the steps of sending me tracks, having me do it, money, all that stuff. It's all on the website, but it's pretty much strictly for work. It's for remote drum tracks. But I mean, not just remote, but it's advertised as me doing custom drum tracks. I
That's
mean,
fantastic.
I can certainly travel to do tracks too, but it's strictly a work site for me.
That's great. So that's your main thing right now that you're doing, along with
That's
creating
my
new
main
music?
thing, and I'm making, yeah, I'm making records here. You know, I found a couple of local producers I've been working with. So they got me doing records up in Austin. They hire me to do different things. I'm just got set up to do the new Mickey Gilley record.
Wow,
Yeah,
interesting.
so that ought to be fun. And I met these great guys up in Austin, Danny B. Harvey and Annie Marie Lewis. And I've been doing some live dates with them, just you know, club stuff just to keep my chops up. But it's great. I love it, man. It's a lot of fun. After not playing for, you know, after my whole cancer thing, and then going through the move and then the pandemic, I actually haven't been out playing for 5, 6 years.
Yeah.
So I did a small Robert Gordon tour up in New York before I moved here, and that's it. So I'm looking forward to doing some dates right now with a band called we're opening up for the Cult, called what's the band called?
The Cult. That's cool.
Yeah, we're doing a couple of dates with the Cult. It's Mark Younger Smith used to play with Billy Idol. He was Billy's guitar player when Steve left for a few years, and he played and made a few records with Billy. He's got a band that he lives in Austin. It's got a band here, and it's called Broken Things, the name of the band. So we're doing two. We're opening up for the Cult next month here, in fact, around Tech. We're doing some of the Texas dates, and that ought to be fun. So that'll really be the first time I'm in front of a proper crowd, you know,
Cool.
that I was used to.
One last thing I want to ask you before you go. Were there any like drummers? I'll just say drummers because you're mostly famous for being a drummer that you look up to, that you think are great drummers that influenced you or that you've adored over the years?
Well, I grew up. The drummers that inspired me growing up was drummers like Dino Dinelli from the Young
Oh
Rascals.
yeah.
He was a New York guy. Mitch Mitchell from Jimi Hendrix's
Mhm.
band would absolutely inspired me. And of course, Keith Moon and John Bonham. You know, those were my four guys that I got all my soul from Dino. I got my fills from Keith, and I got my solidness from Bonham.
That's
You know,
awesome.
yeah.
And maybe a little craziness from Keith Moon too.
Well, the fills, the crazy fills,
Yeah.
the madman fills was the Keith stuff. Yeah, yeah.
Well, hey, Tommy, thanks a lot, man, for taking the time to talk to us, man. I really appreciate it.
Great, Stephen. Make sure you play that Downtown Phantom record, man.
I am. I'm going to play a couple tracks on this show. You'll hear it on the show.
Fantastic, brother.
Hey, good luck to you, man. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Steve-O.